talk about what the parable of the new wine into old wineskins, that parable has to do with, in my opinion. And I believe it relates to the old self and new self. In Luke 5, starting in verse 36, and he was also telling them a parable. No one tears a piece of cloth from a new garment and puts it on an old garment. Otherwise he will both tear the new garment, and the piece from the new will not match the old. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the new wineskin, the new wine will burst the skins, and it will be spilled out, and the skins will be ruined. But new wine must be put into fresh wineskins, and no one, after drinking old wine, wishes for new. He says the old is good enough. And I want to relate that to Romans 12, where it talks about us being living sacrifices, and we'll read on beyond that here in a tiny bit. Therefore, Romans 12, verse 1. Therefore I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so as you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. Now let's go to Colossians. Colossians 3, verse starting in verse 1. Therefore you have been raised up with Christ. Keep seeking the things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on the things above, not on the things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden in Christ in God. Hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, is revealed, then you also will be revealed with his glory. Therefore consider the members of your earthly body as dead to immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and greed. For it is because of these things that the wrath of God will come upon the sons of disobedience. And in them you also once walked when you were living in them. But now you also put them all aside: anger, wrath, malice, slander, abusive speech from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you laid aside the old self with its evil practices, and have put on the new self, who is being renewed to a true knowledge according to the image of the one who created him. A renewal in which there is no distinction between Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, and it, these different groups. But the whole point of that passage about new self has to do with, this is related to that you don't put new wine into old wineskins. How that's related is that you can't have the new self, like the burnt offering, the burnt offering, the skin of the burnt offering, which symbolizes Yeshua, that he imputes his righteousness to us, just like parts are wrapped, the boards in the tabernacle are wrapped in gold, which is, represents Christ's righteousness on us, I think, that we are wrapped in his righteousness. That's the new wineskin, or the old. We have to put in new wine into that wineskin. We don't put the old behaviors and the old practices into it. We don't put the new practices into the old self. We have to put it into the new self. As it talks about there here in Colossians. And it has to do with how we live. That the new ways don't get put in the old body. They get put in the renewed body. That's why we are to be transformed. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Being living sacrifices. That's why that's so important. So, hopefully this concept makes sense to some degree, and something that we can apply to our lives, because it is important. And if we don't put new wine into this new wineskin that is Yeshua, that Yeshua gave us through his sacrifice, we're doing a disservice. And, we can't afford to go back. We have to live accordingly. Shalom, shalom.